Good morning and welcome to the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I'm just wondering, do you have to be a government worker, in your opinion, to be in public service? I certainly don't think that's the case. As I say, this is the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I am your host. I'm Kurt. It is Monday the 7th of December today, not December. I'm trying to get over that. Don't really understand why that's happening, but it is, so we'll deal with it. I want to welcome those aboard who are coming on Rumble on the podcast and on YouTube. And I wanted to talk about a subject today of public servant. And I chose public servant as opposed to public service, but really the two I'm sort of talking about, considering the same thing, right? What I want to say is this. Well, let's ask a question. Let's start with a question. What is a public servant? What is that? Well, it's really pretty simple in my mind. It's a person who's trying to serve the public, right? It's somebody who's trying to do things for the public. What does it mean to be a public servant? It means doing things that the public needs and desires as a part of what you do by vocation or avocation. That is to say, whether or not it's your job, whether it's whatever it is, the whole point is to do things that the public in general needs and wants from you. That's what it is. So, is being a public servant then only about being in government? Well, I would argue no. I would certainly say that that's not the case. I would say that if you work in a gas station, the fact that you're there at 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning, waiting for people to come fuel their vehicles or get their cup of coffee, makes you a public servant. That's what it does. And that's not by any means the only place that happens. Are you a public service when you clean toilets? In my opinion, you are. In my opinion, you are a public servant when you clean toilets, when you clean offices, when you work behind a cash register. All of the jobs that I've talked about before, those blue-collar, low-skilled jobs, those are public service jobs too. But they're not alone, right? People who are higher-skilled jobs also fit into that fray, if you will, right? People who are tech types, people who are office workers, people who are lawyers, people who are doctors, people who do so many things, engineers, so many things that different people do. And all of these are being done essentially as public service. Now, you might be saying to yourself, but these guys are getting paid for what they do. Well, let me ask you a question. For people who work in politics and for people who are working in government and bureaucracy, do they get paid for what they do? Well, of course they do, right? That doesn't take a genius to figure out. No genius is needed to understand that these people are being paid for what they do. And am I calling that a bad thing? Well, no, I'm absolutely not doing so. What I'm actually saying is that the individuals in question are paid because that's the way they're able to do whatever work that they're doing. But that also applies to people in the private sector, people who are not public workers, right? So yes, certainly I would say blue-collar workers are. Definitely I would say typically technical workers are. I would generally say that that's a reasonable thing. Now we come to the hard question for lots of people. What about people like CEOs and business owners? Are these people providing public service? And my answer is, it's hard for me to imagine somebody who's doing more of that job. Why? Because if you happen to be the owner or CEO or whatever of Walmart, your company is employing, I don't even know how many people. Let's just remember that HP, where I used to work for a time, at the time that I started working there, had 250,000 employees. They had 250,000 employees. Even when HPE split off of HPE, I was informed that there were something like 110,000 employees there. So the very idea that that Walmart or HP or so many others were not public in nature is a foolish idea, in my opinion. Of course they are. Of course they are, right? And so the people who are working as CEOs are the ones who are making sure that there are jobs and making sure that people are working. And so that's an important part of public service in my mind. So the larger question in my mind is who doesn't qualify as a public servant? And you might think to yourself, well, people who are unemployed, you might think to yourself, people who are retired really technically don't qualify as public servants anymore. But the truth is that's not even a fair statement. Why? Because you may be unemployed, but that doesn't mean you're not doing anything. That means you're not doing anything for which you are being paid. It doesn't mean you're not doing anything, right? The same applies to retired people. There are a lot of retired people who, when they retire, they decide that they're going to do lots more public service that's sort of needed than just the things that they would have done in their job, right? And by the way, that applies to lots of people who work for a living as well. They go out there and they do things that are basically public services for others. They do Meals on Wheels or whatever, right? They do all of these various things that are designed to enrich and improve their communities, which, by the way, is a very important thing. I was talking to somebody about this on Saturday, so a couple days ago now. And I was saying, look, one of the problems that people have is they expect government to be the solution to all of their ills. And that's not true. Government is not the solution to all of your ills. In fact, they're not really mostly the solution to any of your ills. Who provides jobs for the most part? Well, businesses do. Yeah, you can argue. You can make the argument that government provides a certain number of jobs at various levels. It's true. But I bet you that if you compared them to small business, you would find that neither big business nor government provides a comparative number of jobs. And big business probably provides more than government does in that regard. But the point is, with regard to who doesn't qualify, it would be a person who sits on their butt collecting unemployment, maybe other benefits, does really nothing, maybe gets drunk or drugged, and basically that's what they do with their time and their effort. These people would not be examples of people that I would consider public servants. But everybody else really qualifies. And so when the term public servant or public service even are applied to politicians as if they're some vaunted class that sits around doing things for the public, I'm sorry, but I'm not really buying that. That's not really a fair statement at all. The reality is that pretty much anybody who works for a living and does things for other people, if you're a thief, okay, you're not really a public servant. If you're a drug dealer, I don't really consider you a public servant. Some might, but I don't. The point is, anytime you do something that's illicit and really wrong, that's not actually helping anybody or that helps people in ways that are really untoward, I suppose you could say that that person technically does not qualify as a public servant. But as a rule, I think it's fair to say that most people in most work, sweeping streets, digging ditches, laying cable, cleaning sewers, whatever they happen to be doing, doing janitorial work, working as grocery checkers, engineers, doctors, lawyers, attorneys, like I say, of one kind or another, right? And so many more. And frankly, and this is the kind of the funny bit to me, CEOs, business owners. These are all people who typically I would consider to be part of the public servant class. Does that mean I exclude all politicians? No. Does it mean that I don't recognize in a sense they have a special position because they have a more general public service outlook than many other people? No, it doesn't really mean that either. But the thing that I cannot say that I will not support is the idea that they are the only people who qualify as public servants. I don't believe that. That's not true as far as I'm concerned. If that's a problem for you, then I'm willing to discuss that. But I have a feeling you're not going to be able to present me with anything that's going to change my mind horribly on that. I just don't think so. My attitude about it is there are lots of people out there who on a day-to-day basis are providing public services. They're doing things that people don't want to do, don't want to be involved in. They're helping people. They're making lives better for folks, and that is a good thing. And that's my attitude typically with regard to public service and public servants. I'm not saying again that politicians don't factor into there when they're acting right, which let's just remember, politicians like everybody else don't necessarily do what it is that they're supposed to do. And by the way, when private citizens don't do what they're supposed to do, they're not really public servants at that moment in time either. Okay, I think it's about time for me to wrap this up for the day. Again, today is Monday, the 7th of December of 2020. Tomorrow will be Tuesday, the 8th of December of 2020, and I will again try to do a daily summation video tomorrow. Again, I welcome all of those aboard. I thank you for having come aboard on Rumble, on podcasts, and on YouTube. Thank you for coming aboard. and hopefully we will see you tomorrow. The speaker on this edition of the Daily Summation is Kurt Schubert. This video was recorded on Monday, the 7th of December of 2020. The Daily Summation is created for Kurt's Religion and Politics. Thanks for watching this edition of the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I hope you found it entertaining or instructional, or maybe both. If you want to see more from me, you can go to blogs.kpschubert.com. That's blogs.kpschubert.com. I am on Twitter, Parler, and Minds.com. My handle on each of those is @kpschubert. That's @kpschubert. I have a Rumble and a YouTube channel. They are the Kurt's Religion and Politics channels on Rumble and YouTube. I have a Facebook page. The Facebook page is Kurt's Religion and Politics as well. I am on Patreon. If you want to support me, that's one of the better places you can do that. And you will find me at Kurt's Religion and Politics on Patreon. I have a podcast. The podcast is podcasts with an S. .kpschubert.com. That's podcasts.kpschubert.com. I think you should be able to find me with relative ease on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify as well. The best way I find to do that is to look for Kurt's Religion and Politics. You can try to use the Daily Summation. I find that it doesn't work as well as a general rule, but you can always try that. I'm glad to have you aboard today, and hopefully we will see you again tomorrow.